Hey, listeners. In the last couple of episodes, I've talked about the benefits of CBUSA, the leading group purchasing organization in construction. We're gearing up here in Minneapolis for an annual builder event called The Summit, September 22nd through September 25th. It'll be in Minneapolis, Minnesota. This event, formerly known as the Power 30, is CBUSA's biggest event of the year. CBUSA members from across the country will come together to learn and engage in networking opportunities like face-to-face meetings with top brands and reps, interactive breakout sessions with fellow builders, and an exclusive vendor expo showcasing the latest materials. I'm excited to attend, and I'm excited to be recording a podcast episode in front of a live audience. Fellow home builders, if you want to be a part of this too, then head over to cbusa.us/learn today. Learn more about CBUSA's benefit and apply for a membership at cbusa.us/learn. Additionally, if you'd like to hear more, I interviewed Ryan Lipchek from CBUSA on episode 26 of the Curious Builder Podcast. Welcome to the Curious Builder Podcast. I'm Mark Williams, your host. Today is our Thursday Q&A. Today's question is, how do you establish yourself and your brand in your target market or your ideal client? This is a great question. I think we'll take the full 20 minutes to talk a little bit about this. For one thing, whoever asked this question, you're light years ahead of where I was when I started my company. I was 23, 24 years old, kind of in the middle of when I started my career, built a house, and sort of just self-discovered along the way. And I would love to go back and ask a question like this. I think had I been more curious at the time of, hey, could I sell my company? Who is my ideal client? I think when I first started, it was, I'm going to build a house because I love it and I'm really passionate about it. And I sort of figured it out, year in and year out. I would say I really didn't start spending a lot of time thinking about this till 5-6 years ago. So maybe 3/4 of the way of my current career. And for sure, the last 2 years, I've thought a lot more about my ideal client. And someone gave me a great analogy about this so maybe I'll talk a little bit about your ideal client is, where do they go? What do they eat? And this person was a fisherman, and they said, if you want to catch a big fish, you've got to go where the big fish like to eat. I just thought it was an interesting concept. It really connected with me. And so, we're in the luxury market, probably 1.5 to 5 million. So as a stereotype, where do those people go to shop? Where do they go to eat? What kind of cars do they drive? And so I spent some time thinking about that. And that was really helpful for me to even consider, like, what publications would I consider advertising in? How would I perceive even the live events that I do? I also think that, being a dad of 3, it was sort of interesting. There was another company one time that, we get a lot of pulls on all of our time. And this person said, hey, would you like to go to this evening event? It's a baseball game, I think it was. And I said, I'm sorry, that just doesn't work. And that same person then said, I think later in the year, it was getting towards Christmas, they said, we have this light parade thing that you can take kids to. And I was like, sure, I'd absolutely take that, because it was something I could do with my kids. So, for this person, she was considering me her client, and she knew that I wasn't really giving up my nights, but that I would do it if it was a family event. And so I think if you, let's say, are catering to a young family, let's say you're probably building a 2-story, stereotypically, at least in our market. And so you're thinking things like a sport court. You're thinking about things that are very kid friendly. Is there some sound insulation between the bedrooms? So if the kids are jumping on the beds, you can still sleep between the bedrooms. So anyway, I think spending some time and actually writing out what your ideal client even looks like. There's a marketing term that many of you might be familiar with called Henry, and that's HENRI, and that's high income, not yet rich. And that is obviously sort of like an up and coming market. I had heard someone years ago say that. I asked them what they thought about Instagram. And I had said at the time that I don't really get a lot of leads out of Instagram. We spend a lot of time and resources and money there, but I haven't really seen, people come directly through it to buy something or to build a custom home. And he had just said that was his clients 5 years before they'd be his clients. And I thought that was really interesting. It really help me stay the course and want to continue to be there. And you can look at your demographics depending on, where you find your demographics as a builder. You can look at your analytics on Instagram. It'll tell you, mine is like 70% women, 30% men, different age groups, things like that. And so depending on what part of the country you're in, depending on who is following your content, you'll get a better idea of how to essentially market to them. For my personal ideal client, it was, something that was valuable to me. Even when I first started, quality was always really important. I cared far more about quality than I cared about quantity. And so maybe because I was the son of a builder and a designer, I really appreciated really good craftsmanship. I've always loved cabinetry and I've always loved trimming. In fact, I've only ever had two cabinet makers my entire career, one for the first 8 years, and then now for the last 12 years, another cabinet shop. And I just really, really appreciate that myself. And I've also asked a lot of my clients sometimes at the end of a project, what things did you appreciate the most and which people did you appreciate the most? And we've done this word thing where basically the word grows depending on what they react to. And the two things for me, they happen to be the name of my cabinet shop, Rich Hip, or Hip Cabinetry, as well as woodwork. At the time, we had a gentleman named Todd Wegman. Shout out to him. He's an amazing craftsman. And people always, I think because they saw so much of what goes into a home, framing is one of them. And so is trimming. There's a lot of time spent and you can visibly see the difference. And I think that was one of the main reasons, other than these people were incredible craftsmen in their own right, as well as very personable. So those were things that didn't surprise me. I think, again, thinking about your ideal customer, for me, if I'm to answer this question for my own company, I'd say the majority of our clients are probably 50 to 65 years old. They're empty nesters, or soon will be. They want to travel. They don't want a house that's too big, oddly enough. They don't want a giant home that's 8, 9, 10,000 square feet because they know they have to take care of it. They're also old enough that they're at an age that they realize a lot of this stuff has to be taken care of. And I'll say that about my second clientele demographics in a minute. And so I think they want something that's very well appointed. They really appreciate craftsmanship. They appreciate attention to detail, but they don't want it to get too out of hand. They're also very much concerned about their budget. They're entering potentially retirement, in 5 to 10 years, based on when they're building this. And so they're considering like, hey, they don't want to get too far over their skis because they've not navigated retirement before. I think the other demographic of client that I have is kind of the opposite, which is 30 to 50. So they're young families, that Henry clientele that is really looking to establish a home that they can grow in. It's a young family. It's probably not their first home. It might be their second or third, but they want to build a home that they're going to stay in for 15, 20 years. Totally different clientele. And so it's really sort of interesting. So in my case, to answer this question, I'm thinking about two different kinds of clients. We recently did a brand exercise with the Curious Collective, and we're going to do it again with designers as well as architects, because every company, I think, probably needs to spend more time on brand than they think. And shout out to Molly Windmiller here locally in Minneapolis with Lab Minneapolis. She does this really cool brand exercise, and one of them is understanding your brand archetypes. This is an old thing. You can probably Google it, and I think there's like 10 or 12 different, I think there's 13 different categories that will sort of latch on to you. And so, mine happened to be what was called a jester. And it was like, if you're choosing to celebrate yourself as your company, it's a little bit different. Then you can really, it's almost like a personality test. If you're choosing as a company to identify like as a brand, and think of well-known brands like Nike or Ferrari or Ford or whatever you want to think in those terms if it's not going to celebrate yourself or what you are as a person. And I don't think there's a right or wrong here. I think it's just important that you would ask yourself these questions. One thing I saw recently that was really interesting was like Ferrari, they don't sell cars, they sell a status symbol. I thought that was really interesting. There was another one that was like Apple doesn't sell products, it sells innovation. And Amazon doesn't sell individual things. It sells convenience and speed. And so it was really interesting to sort of challenge these brands that we know and love and use a lot, but from a different point of view. And they're very rarely a thing. It's more of a concept or a lifestyle. And I think the sooner that I realized, and I think I did realize this a lot earlier on than maybe I give myself credit for, is that we were building a home for people that wanted a certain lifestyle. And I maybe got away from that in the middle of my career. And now I've kind of redoubled down on that and understanding like what kind of lifestyle do you want? And it's not about building the biggest house or the smallest house. I think it's about building a house that fits you. And I think the same is true of a brand. I think you don't want the biggest brand or the smallest brand. You want a brand that fits you. Shoe size. I've mentioned this before, but like I think Shaquille O'Neal has like size 22 or 24 shoe size. I'm like a 10 and a half. Like I'm going to be very uncomfortable in his shoe and he'd be very uncomfortable in mine. I'm not going to be able to run. I'll fall right out of his shoes. And, he couldn't even fit, half of his toes in my shoes. The point is like it needs to fit you and it can change. I think one of the things that I've realized about a good brand is that it has to be dynamic enough to grow with you. And sometimes we outgrow our brand. I think that's why, considering a brand refresh, for me, it was about every 7 to 10 years, I needed a brand refresh. And I've spoken previously on the podcast. Mark Williams Custom Homes went through a brand rechange at the same time we started the Curious Builder about 2 years ago now. And it was really important. Someone brought me aside. In this case, it was my wife. And she said, the homes that you're building are no longer what your brand represents. And so it was more than just typography change and color changes. I mean, it was a new website, a new look, a new vibe, like all new. And I think maybe I'm wrong in this, but I feel like men are a little bit more set in their ways than women. I think of like shirts. I can go through my closet and I'm not somebody that necessarily throws things away easily, but I don't hold on to stuff. I'm kind of in the middle, I guess. And I guess my point in bringing this up is I bet if I went into my closet right now, I could find shirts that I probably don't wear maybe once a summer and just get rid of them. And I think the same is true of a brand. I think if you look at your business like it represents you, maybe you're training for a marathon and you've lost weight and your pants no longer fit you. You have to get a new pant. Are you better off taking your pants into a tailor, getting them retailored? It's a lot of work and probably actually more expensive than just probably going and buying a new pair of pants. And so make sure that your brand is fitting what you are and the services that you want. I think it can be aspirational too. This episode is brought to you by Alpine Hardwood Flooring. They've been our partner now for over a decade, installing all our wood floors on all our new homes as well as our remodels. And on a personal level, Adam and Anthony Jankala, the owners, are just absolutely amazing people. They've been so supportive of my career as well as doing anything we need to make sure that our clients are happy. And they work so well with our other vendors and trade partners at not only protecting their product, but also ensuring everyone else's looks great. So if you're looking for a wood floor or for a refinish, I highly recommend Alpine Hardwood Flooring. I think one thing that architects do really well, better than most builders, in my opinion, is that a lot of builders will put every single photo that they've ever done on their website, thinking that more is better. And sometimes in a design meeting, it's nice to sit down and be like, oh, we built this house. It just because it's fresh in your memory. You obviously, it's not like you throw pictures away of your kids. You keep them. You just might not have them, hanging on every wall all the time. You change them out. And I think your website should be maybe your more recent work or the aspirational work or the work that you want to do more of. I think when the brand specialist that I work with kind of explained that what should be on your website is the homes that you want to attract, the clientele that you want to attract, which is what we're talking about right now, is identifying your brand and your target market. One of the things that we went through is these different brand pillars, which is really helpful. And I'll just buzz through them right now. There's 5 of them. There's clarity, which is just being really succinct and specific. There's purpose, which is being intentional, real, being authentic. Uniqueness, being distinctive, being original. Expressive. So is it compelling? Narrative? Is it connective? And credibility. Is it consistent? Is it quality? And is it trustworthy? So these are all big brand pillars that you can spend time thinking on. Again, I'm not one that created this. This is all out there. You can search this as well. And there's workbooks that you can go through. So like for me, clarity is what is something that you want to be known for? Something very succinct. Is it lifestyle? Is it enjoyable? Is it fun? Is it aspirational? And I'm not here to share all the things that, I've identified with, but for you to sort of think about that, I think the shorter it is, the simpler. It's kind of like KISS, keep it simple, stupid. If you can, I think this is where I think having your brand live, live well so you can dwell well, or dreams, or like you see all these taglines along this. I used to have it too, which is like building dream homes one home at a time. So those little sayings stick, but they should really line up with what your core values are. I think purpose, I for me, I didn't realize it at the time, but I do now. It's like just being authentic, be who you are. And it's a I think when you are a brand, especially if it represents you as the business owner, the closer you can make it to yourself, assuming you're comfortable and happy with yourself, not that there's not work to be done there, but the easier it is for that brand to just, you are the brand. Again, I'm speaking from my own personal experience that, my company, is me. And so that's the brand. It would be a little bit more difficult, I think, to create sort of a third party persona, but I think a company can. I mean, I think those companies I named before, like Nike, Ferrari, Ford, I mean, a brand can certainly have an authentic purpose. And I think when they stray away from it, I think a Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola, I don't know what year it was. I was probably still in high school. So sometime in the 90s, and they went to a different Coke and people hated it. And I think they got rid of it and went back to the original formula because they were trying to refresh it. So some things, your core audience might not want you to do it. I know that there was one builder, he only built Ramblers and his brother only built two stories. And, what would it be like? The world would be shocked if that Rambler builder started building two stories. Would his clients be like, oh, I guess he doesn't build Ramblers anymore? So I think just knowing your own messaging and think about it, I think you can certainly be diversified. But some of the most successful companies are ones that just stay super tight focused. And I'd heard recently too that sometimes when you have success, you start straying into other ideas and other things, and you get away from kind of your core message. And I'd even heard recently in the newspaper, just seeing companies that were laying off people. And essentially what happens is if we aren't keeping track of our costs, if we're getting a little fat in the middle, that layoffs happen because we weren't watching costs. We probably started expanding outside our core envelope. And there's a number of businesses out there that do a phenomenal job just staying in their lane. It might be villa homes and that's all they build. It might be, single family homes, custom homes, whatever it is, there's a success strategy there. But I think when we start to try to play in all of them, and trust me, I'm guilty of this. I've done this many times in my career where I had a great, bright idea and I thought I would try something new. And there's some value in that. So I'm not saying don't try it, but just be aware of it and understand that if it's going away from what your core focus is, that you could lose your core client and the client might change. And I think, again, that goes back to the brand refresh. You may want to change clients. Maybe you don't want the client that you have. I mean, early on in your career, we spoke about this previously, of hustling for every job that you have and identifying your ideal client. Well, if you don't want to say yes to every single person, hello, you have to start saying no. And how do you say no? Well, you can only really say no if you're on firm footing, if you really know what services you offer and you can sort of define that. I think the next pillar, going into a little bit more detail, is expressiveness. I think how we connect with people. To me, this has been probably one of the keys to my success or longevity anyway, is I really do enjoy people. So the homes that I build, we really want to connect to them, whether it's connecting to their lifestyle, connect to their value statements. So I think understanding your company's desire to connect and then being unique. If you are going to be a commodity, so if a client could pick you or 10 others just like you, what are you doing that's different? Is it service? Is it quality? Is it design? Maybe it's the land. Maybe there's this saying that real estate agents love, like, love my land, love my builder. If you control the land in the right locations, it doesn't matter if they like you, they've got to build with you if they want to be on that land. There's very few things that you can't change in a home. But one thing you can't change is the land and the location. And so location has always been pretty key. I mean, you look at the real estate market, whether it's commercial or residential, having the prime locations, they come with a premium, but there's a reason. And so I think think about your competitive advantage. Is it maybe you're a sole proprietor? I think I used to sell this all the time. I used to sell against bigger companies and it was very successful for me, where I say, you know what, I'm, as the owner of the company, I'm going to give you a lot of my time because I am the company. And as I've gotten bigger, I still say that because it's still true. I run still a pretty small ship and a pretty tight crew. But if your goal is to scale, at some point you're not going to be able to say that anymore. Or if you do, you better be backing it up. You don't want to tell your client you're going to be there the whole time and then not be there because you've set them up to fail and your project managers to fail. And so I think if your unique competitive advantage is, hey, I'm the greatest builder, make sure that you are, and then B, that you are there servicing the client. Or I know a lot of builders that tell you right up front, I have an amazing team. My team will service you way beyond what I can personally. And that's also true. And so I think just understanding what your unique competitive advantage is. We're excited to announce that we've opened up another Curious Collective. For the last year, we've had the Curious Builder Collective. We now have the Curious Builder Collective for designers. The first ones will be happening in September. All the details are going to be on our website. We have 30 spots available. Half of them have already filled. We additionally have 8 spots left in the Builder Collective. If you're interested in getting together in small groups of 9 with local Minneapolis-based builders and designers in separate groups, and talking about your business, talking about your brands, asking those questions that you wish you could ask another business owner, then this is the place for you. Details can be found at the CuriousBuilderPodcast.com. And then, of course, credibility. Credibility is super huge, but I think this is usually done over time. I think the best way to show you're credible is just to, like what somebody said, don't judge me by my best day. Don't judge me by my worst day. Judge me by what I do consistently throughout the years. And I think that credibility, that consistency, that is super key to the longevity of any brand, of any business, but for sure in custom home building. I think because a home is so personal, it's really, really important that you extend that level of trust and that extending that level of credibility, to your homeowners. I think your reputation matters. I think it's really, really important to think about that. So I'm glad that this question was asked. Hopefully some of those things were helpful. I know that makes me want to go back. And even though I just did this exercise actually last week during a brand exercise in the Curious Collective, I don't think you can ever spend too much time refocusing on who your client is, who your brand is, and who you want to show up to be. Till next week. Thanks for joining. Thanks for listening to the Curious Builder Podcast. If you like what you listen to, please give us a 5-star rating and write us a review. It really means a lot. It's a great way for us to just understand what you like about the podcast and what we can keep doing. So like and review, and please share with your friends and family. Find out more at CuriousBuilderPodcast.com.